The Three Down Greencast is brought to you by the Pile of Bones Brewing Company, Regina's only downtown brewery. Well, this is a football podcast, and we will get into football, but sometimes there are moments in the world of sports and in life in general that transcend kind of the little bubble that they usually live in, and I think it's safe to say something that we just witnessed recently deserves a little bit of discussion on this podcast, and that was, I'm just going to call it, the shot. Kawhi Leonard eliminating the Philadelphia 76ers in Game 7 at the buzzer. Interestingly to note, apparently, according to Sportsnet stats, and probably through some other sources they got it from, the first game-winning shot at the buzzer in Game 7 history in the NBA. As the Raptors move on to the Eastern Conference Final, as they will probably lose to the Milwaukee Bucks, but at least they got there. And it's just a moment that has everyone talking because it was so crazy, and we're going to get into it a little bit. We're not going to spend too much time on this, so don't worry. If you want to skip forward a couple minutes, we'll be into football talk. But it was just one of those moments you can't help but get caught up in it. I'm sure even if you're not a basketball fan, if you're not a sports fan, like I was with my family tonight,
Yep.
And, you know, like my sister-in-law, who's not a basketball fan, I showed her the clip, and she was like, wow. You know, it was just, it's insane. And we'll get into the parallels because it's crazy that the last time these teams met in the playoffs, it came down to a shot when Vince Carter missed a shot, and this time they made the shot, and it's just sports, man. There's nothing else like it.
That is exactly it. It's like a movie. It's the drama. It is. You're right. It's captured everybody's attention. I admittedly am not a big basketball guy. I love watching it live, not much for watching one on TV. But this whole game had my attention, and same parallel. Like my father-in-law, who big sports fan. We always talk sports when we get together. Don and I always do. But he asked me. He's like, tonight. He's like, hey, when's the Raptors game? I want to watch this. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, you've never watched a Raptors game before in your life. But just that moment was just sports in a capsule, and that's why we love it. And I think one of the better tweets I saw, and if I recall who I'm not going to lie, I've been drinking beer since before the game, before we record this here, Joel. So I'm doing this one with at least some warm and fuzzy feelings going on. So my memory might not be the sharpest, but
what else is new there?
It's true. I saw it on Twitter, and somebody said the ghost of Vince Carter's miss 18 years ago is the one that tapped that ball in. But I love the reaction of the fans at Scotiabank Arena. That shot goes up and it's silence.
Oh yeah.
And bounces once, bounces twice. You're thinking to yourself, oh my goodness, it's just this moment that seemed like, now that I've seen it on the highlights a couple times, I'm like, ow, that didn't feel like that long. But watching it live was like, oh my God, this is taking forever. Is that basketball going in? And then it drops, and it's just bedlam. And you're right. This is why we love sports, is because things like that are just bananas. And I loved it, and it's a franchise-altering moment for the Raps. And, they've definitely, between a pretty successful launch of the Canadian Elite Basketball League this past week, that piqued my interest in watching this Raptors playoff run. I got to say, might be adding more basketball to the dish, so I'm sure my wife will love that as I pick another sport to watch on TV.
Well, as I've dropped hockey this year, I've kind of been following along the basketball a little bit. I still don't really watch a lot of the regular season just because in the NBA still there is a bit of that uncompetitive balance where there's maybe a handful of teams that really have a shot, and you kind of know where everyone's going to finish, so it's hard really to watch the regular season at times, in my opinion. Yeah. If you're the hardcore basketball fan, I get it. But I've always loved watching the NBA playoffs. So I've watched a fair bit of that over the years regardless, but it's really ramped up this year. And, just to speak of my love of the NBA playoffs, I will always, to this day, it could always be surpassed. But to me, one of the greatest sporting events I ever watched, not like live, but just on TV, was the 2013 NBA Final Game 6 between the Heat and the Spurs. That game was just off the charts good. I remember being in Saskatoon with Jamie and I. We watched that game in the condo we were staying in and the bar we went to that night, and it was just, we were both just like, wow. Like, that game was just ridiculous. It was just, and the Heat won, the Heat ended up winning, and LeBron got his championship, whatever, and that sucked. But the game itself was off the charts, and those are the kind of moments the playoffs create, and I think, the NBA playoffs, they get so good as you go, especially the second round where you have those 8 teams. The first round can be a bit of a dud, but I love the playoffs that build, and the NBA playoffs do that, so that's kind of what sucks me in every year, and this was just another one of those moments that really only, I guess baseball can too. There's the drip, but it's more of a dramatic build up to like Joe Carter's walk-off home run kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's not quite at the same level, but no other sport really allows you the ability to win the game when it's essentially it's over, right? You can't do anything else. It's up in the air and you're like, and then you win.
Yeah. and no, you're absolutely right. And the thing I do love, and you said it best, the thing I love about the NBA playoffs is how it progresses, right? Basketball is one of those sports that the cream of the crop always seems to prevail, right? You rarely see that. I mean, outside of the Dallas Mavericks a few years ago, you rarely see that 8 seed pull off the major upset.
Yeah.
And
I think an 8 seed is won like maybe once. I think it was like the Golden State Warriors before the start of this run that they're on. They were kind of like a meddling team, and they were the 8 seed one year, and they won. I think that was like the first time ever it had happened in NBA history. So
no, but you're absolutely right, and there is something. There's something to say about, we all love the chaos that is hockey and football. And I mean, football, it's one game, so anything can happen. But to me, there is something to be said that, at the end of the NBA finals are always going to be, arguably, they're always going to be one of the best teams in the league. And that. And that's what makes it so good. I remember even watching, again, another great finals game. It was Game 7, Golden State and Cleveland, when LeBron had the block. Like just this freakish athletic play that you knew he had in him. And like, I remember watching the sports science episode on it, and just how perfectly he timed that, and how, like, no other human can get and do that. Like, that's moments you see in the NBA final. You're right. The regular season sucks. It really does. Yeah. And even at that, I'm used to watching sports where, a touchdown in the first quarter can be so monumental, and a big goal in the first period can be so monumental. And basketball, it seems like, okay, it kind of goes back and forth till about the fourth quarter. But
there's always, generally speaking, there's a lot of ebbs and flows and ups and downs, and you just kind of play through it and you see what happens at the end. Yeah, you do get the odd blowout. And what I do like about basketball is when there's a blowout, they basically just play out the clock and move on to the next game.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no nonsense.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Like, and there's nothing to delay it. It's okay. Let's get this over with. Let's go up and down the court and finish this off. But you're right about the NBA playoffs. They've always been fascinating. I've always watched them, and again, I would attend a regular season game live in a heartbeat, and I will be attending regular season games live for the Saskatchewan Rattlers, just to check it out, see something cool. But you're right. The playoffs are just there's something to them, and they really make some. There's so many moments every year like the Kawhi Leonard shot. Yeah, and that makes them cool, and I'm fully hooked now.
Yeah, and now that we've effectively lost all our listeners as well as basketball talk, we can probably move on to the bulk of this episode. We're obviously going to get into the Riders signing Solomon Elimimian, as that was a move that I think many of us thought was going to happen.
Yep.
Once it came down to the final two, we'll do a little bit of a draft recap, kind of talk about that. Talk a little bit about Jon Ryan and a little bit about training camp, as that's opening up. At least it is scheduled to open up next weekend in Saskatoon. Whether it actually does or not will be another question. But as of right now, it's set to, and we'll just have to wait and see until we get to then, John. I'm almost scared to ask because of the weekend you've had, but what's in the glass?
Well, what's in the glass? A nice, smooth recovery beer, Rebellion Lentil Cream. It's tasty, it's smooth, it's not big on the alcohol content. You're right. One of my dearest friends and longtime curling teammate, Mitchell Rishko, got married this weekend, and we had one hell of a party last night. So kind of in recovery mode today. Of course, got kicked back into it by the Raptors game. But so Rebellion Lentil Cream, the beer of choice this evening. Nice.
I'm taking a little bit easy tonight, too, as on Friday night I enjoyed a nice 10% beer from Blackbridge. And then last night had a friend's party, birthday gathering, so I had a few. So ending off the weekend with a nice Pile of Bones cranberry sour.
Ooh, yeah, that stuff's so good. That's also a good recovery beer. I haven't really left my house today, so I went with what is in my fridge.
That's entirely fair. Someone who may or may not have left his house today was new Riders middle linebacker. Well, we assume middle linebacker Solomon Elimimian. As he officially signed with the team a couple of days ago. As I said, I don't think it's overly surprising. I think once it was confirmed that it was basically down to the Riders or Hamilton, I think you had to give the Riders at least 60-40 odds on that. Yeah, that it was going to happen because for some reason it just seems whenever these big names are free to move about from West Division teams, they generally don't go East.
No.
So I just never really felt that unless Hamilton's offer was so good or there was such a glaring need or he really thought they were going to win, it always felt like the Riders were probably the heavy favorites for this guy.
Yeah, the only thing was when Hamilton released that handful of players earlier this week before the Elimimian signing was made official, I thought maybe they've cleared out a whole bunch of cap room because they put some ridiculous cash offer on the table and he's about to take it. I think that was the only moment of this entire process that I said to myself, oh, maybe they're loading up to go ahead and sign him. And they didn't. Again, fills a need for the Riders that you and I have talked so much about, to the point that I'm sure if you or I ever ran into Sam Hurl and he happened to listen to this podcast, he'd probably punch either one of us in the throat. So
I feel like Sam Hurl kind of knows what's going on. I think he's seen even just Cameron Judge getting to where he is, and he probably knows his role on this team now and is pretty comfortable with it, I would assume. I mean, I don't know. Yeah. I don't talk to Sam on a regular basis, so I can't tell you that for sure. But he doesn't seem to me like he's a dumb guy. Like, he knows. I think he can... football players generally know what's going on with their team, and I feel like Sam probably has an idea that he's kind of a mix-in linebacker special teamer guy now. So
yeah, absolutely. It's just he's been. If we had a whipping boy for this show talking about this team, it's Sam Hurl, and that goes back to day one, episode 1 of this podcast. So it moves him again to, you mentioned the reserve, fill in, give Cameron Judge some time off because you now got to think that he's moved ahead of the depth chart. He's still going to be. He works. I mean, everything we say about Sam, he works his ass off, and he's great on special teams. And you know what? You need a handful of guys with a Canadian passport on your team that fill exactly that role.
Well, how many years was Mike McCullough on this team and essentially played that role and was occasionally the starting middle linebacker because an American got hurt?
No, you're absolutely right. Like that is exactly And Mike McCullough would come in for a couple of games and generally be energized and play well. And you're right. Sam Hurl is the new Mike McCullough. Also, as a total aside, Chris Zarka was at the wedding I was at last night.
Oh, really? He wasn't at the #CFL wedding. The Strulé wedding that was all over Twitter.
No, he was on at the Strulé wedding that, in fairness, I don't know the Strulés. They sound like wonderful people.
I met them. I've interacted with Deb and Vince a little bit on Twitter, and I met them at the Grey Cup last year. Lovely people. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, really, really good people. Congrats on them on the CFL wedding, which was super cool. Watching, you see the photos, everybody in their jerseys. That was legit. No, we were all looking, to quote Fake Gainer, dapper AF last night at Mitchell's wedding, and Chris Zarka was there. He's dating one of Mitch's relatives. I don't know. I talked to him. It got blurry after that.
Okay, fair enough. And so I wrote the piece for 3 Down Nation because obviously when something happens with the Riders, I'm asked, or the presumption is that I should probably write something about it. So I did. So I did. And I had to think about it for a little bit, and I was sitting there and I had a little bit of writer's block for a little bit. Then I had a beer, and I got a little bit better. And I thought to myself, and we talked about this before, and I was like, could this defense actually be better this year? And I started thinking about it more. And I'm like, they just might. Because the way the defense is set up now, and Jeremy O'Day has shrewdly, made the switches where I think it was safe to say, last year's defense is obviously very good. It's a very different defense now. The Riders have built their defense now more of a traditionally sound defense, rather than a defense that relies on a genius defensive coach drawing up ridiculous schemes and relying on pure athletic freak ability of certain players.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, you look at every position is now filled by a traditionally strong player that traditionally fits that mold of what you want, like Mika Johnson and Solomon Elimimian, and all the different.
Even Mike Edem at safety is coming into his role in there. Like he was a guy that's kind of been around the league a little bit, and we didn't really think much of him. All of a sudden, last year in Chris Jones' defense, but this guy's a legit starting Canadian safety now.
Absolutely, yeah. He's grown into that role, and you look at that entire team, and I know I saw tons of memes about the front seven on the Riders and how other quarterbacks have to be feeling right now. And traditionally, like, I'm pretty sure, and you said it best, and we were talking about this before we started recording, you could just take that team and just let them go ball. And I think they're going to win. Naturally, of course, they're not just going to not have defensive meetings and defensive schemes and things like that. But the level of talent you have out there, as you said, you're not going to have to scheme to have success. The players will bring you success, and the schemes will put it over the top. So it's going to be, other quarterbacks, other teams, just.
And I think most importantly, for as good as that defense was last year, their biggest flaw, especially when Mikael Brooks is out of the lineup, was run defense.
Yes.
And now with Mika Johnson in the middle and Solomon Elimimian, I can never say his name or write his name, now at middle linebacker, that changes that dynamic for them. And the fact that, okay, now teams like Winnipeg and potentially Ottawa, we don't know what they're going to look like without William Powell, but we believe they'll probably still have a pretty good running game because they always have good offensive line, and that's the start of every good run game, is your offensive line. So you would think that those teams will still be able to do what they did, but now they have an answer to it. They didn't have that before, really. Like, they weren't awful. I'm not, because they didn't get gashed every game. They weren't awful against the run, but there were times, yes, especially the playoff game, Andrew Harris went off, and he effectively won that game for them because there was that hole there, especially when Mikael Brooks wasn't available.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And it'll be interesting to see what happens. And, you hope Mika doesn't get injured. But as you mentioned, now you have your safety net. If Mika misses a game or two, you still have Saul in the middle, and vice versa. And can we also, I think the Riders should hold a contest before the season starts, where if you could say Solomon Elimimian 5 times fast and then spell his name, your season tickets are free.
I'm going to think I don't need season tickets because I would never win that.
Neither would I.
Literally, as I was writing that piece for 3 Down Nation, I just had Elimimian copied, and I would just paste it every time I wanted to say his name. It was just so much easier than trying to remember this at this point. I'll get it eventually; it'll come around. Like, I learned to spell Hairelahu for when he was in Winnipeg because he was, you had to talk about him enough. Eventually, you pick up on it, but right now I'm just like, oh, Elimimian, how do I spell that? I go to Google and it autofills. I'm like, okay, copy.
Copy, paste.
That's a new world trick in sports journalism now, is just copy and paste the names you don't know how to spell.
Well, and the best thing is you're probably, because it's such a difficult name, you're probably spelling it like, it's not like you can just do like a search and replace.
No.
You probably butcher it at least like 5 different ways in an article. So
because it's always going to pop up on like as incorrect, and it's always going to be spelled wrong according to autocorrect. So
exactly, because in fairness, it kind of looks like one of those names that somebody might have made up as a bad guy name in some sort of video game. The evil Elimimian.
Yeah, and so, Saul's on the team now, and that should make the Rider defense better, of course. Everything's always just on paper, and we'll have to wait and see what happens. As we kind of rehash our last episode and move toward, the definitive answers as to what we were talking about last episode, the CFL draft also happened since the last time we talked, and I don't think the Riders really had any major surprises. We'll get into a little bit of the 8th round pick in a bit there because I thought that was interesting for the reaction from some people. But
yes,
I'm going to have to go ahead right now. We're just going to get into this. I'm going to disagree with 3 Down Nation's John Hodge. He wrote about it on draft day, and he continued to talk about it during the 3 Down Nation podcast with himself and Justin Dunk, where they talked about the draft, that he felt the Riders needed another Canadian offensive line. I don't agree with that. Now, could they have used another one? Sure. Did they need one?
Yeah.
No. I don't think they had to take a Canadian offensive lineman. It's because essentially signing Dakota Shepley the days before the draft kind of comes out as a draft pick in the end at that point. The guy hasn't played. He's new to your roster. He adds to the depth. They have Darius Bladdock, who they're pretty high on. They have some other guys that they're pretty high on. Like, they have options. I think the depth has improved greatly compared to where it was.
Yes.
I mean, especially, how much did we, kind of, shadow over this offensive line at the start of last year. I think even over the course of last year, they got better as the year went on. And, the same group is back, so there's no reason to believe that they shouldn't be able to build off what they have with a little bit more reinforcements that they already have, that they have now added to the roster a little bit.
Well, and two, if the ratio changes at the end of the CBA negotiation, which is floating out there that it could happen, and the Riders, maybe decide to go American, an extra spot in an offensive line, you're always going to be able to find that guy. There's always American offensive linemen sitting around someplace. But no, I like their Canadian depth. I think depending on, and again, both of us really hope he gets well soon. Dan Clark in a single vehicle car accident on the way home from a community event. Released from hospital. No word on how badly injured Dan is, the Regina product, but that depth could be tested early here in camp if he does miss a little bit of time. But you're right. Getting Dakota Shipley, to me, was almost like the CFL handing out a random pick at the end of the second round. Just because
why would they do that?
and what kind of professional sports league would do that a week before the draft?
Nah, madness, craziness. So what they ended up doing instead was they took a couple of receivers, and in the first 2 rounds, and they took an interesting guy after that, which I think is there's still obviously fingerprints of Chris Jones on this draft, just because of the fact that you're not going to turn around, your draft philosophy a couple of months before when the guy changes. It's like when a new GM takes over in any sport, it's basically your first draft. You're running off the old guy's draft because you haven't had time to build your own thing. So that's just the way it is. But so they have a guy, they draft the guy who's a defensive back, linebacker, safety, kind of can play a lot of different things and probably a special teamer, so that's a good addition. But so they got a couple of receivers, and I've always been on the record as a guy, I'm like, I don't like when you draft for need. And I wrote the piece for 3 Down Nation as well, where I thought, okay, they drafted for need, but they did it in a smart way, where... Okay, they weren't definitively, you couldn't say that these 2 guys were definitively the best player available, but they weren't reaching. They weren't doing a severe reach to get a guy. There was a reasonable spot for those 2 players to be selected. So when the best player available also fits a need, then yes, you should do it.
Yeah, and I'm with you 110%. I mean, I think the consensus, and reading through Haji's pick-by-pick draft grades, he did rate those Riders' moves with the receivers fairly high. And I would even argue before the draft that the Riders had a significantly greater need to find a Canadian wideout than they did to add to the offensive line depth. Because, let's face it, you don't have the Canadian Air Force sitting there in Riderville anymore, and you're going to need some flexibility with the ratio depending on injuries and things like that. So, go out. They got a few really talented, really well-rated guys that maybe can step into the lineup here right away and play that Canadian receiver spot that it looks like the Riders are going to need. And hopefully that's not just a throwaway spot like it seems to be on some offenses where you still, you have the ability, team can shut down the Americans and shut down your team. On thinking like Winnipeg in the Julian Fodoli-Gadino days. Basically, he was just irrelevant. He was out there running routes. I mean, might as well you or I been out there in shoulder pads because he never saw the ball. But I do like the moves. You're right. They didn't reach. Best player available may have been another guy that would have filled a different need. But again, John Hodge likes the picks. I will always defer to Haji when it comes to draft things and life in general. He's generally a much smarter human than me.
Well, he is a teacher. He doesn't just sell cars, so...
I don't sell cars.
I just say it. I know you don't. I just love to get a rise out of you by saying it.
I know you do. Although technically I did sell you your car, but that's okay.
The paperwork says otherwise.
That's true. It does. And actually, I think one of the guys that technically sold you your cars is not there anymore. But that's a whole other aside. I'm a financial services manager. Damn it!
I talk to the people. I'm a people person.
That's right. I drive a Dodge Stratus. I will whip you in the nuts with a car antenna.
Okay.
You get that reference? That was at the Will Ferrell Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
He was a regional manager.
I was referencing Office Space, but
Oh, well, I took your Office Space reference and then went to SNL.
Apparently, yeah.
I got the Office Space reference. I love that movie.
Absolutely. Who doesn't? Maybe not. I don't know if Justin Dunk has seen it. He hasn't seen a lot of it. Like, I haven't seen a lot of things. He's seen even less than I have, which is impressive.
Well, whoa. Okay. You need to find out before the next recording if Dunk has in fact seen Office Space, and if not, respect him, love him. What the hell is wrong with him?
Yeah, I don't know. Another guy we don't know if they've seen Office Space or not is Jon Ryan. Considering his wife is a comedian, I'm going to say he has.
Probably, yep.
And there isn't really news here. I just really want to get into this quickly because the question keeps coming up every time Jeremy O'Day is available. Is if there's any interest or what's going on with Jon Ryan, because he worked out with the team once and I guess he's kind of expressed interest in maybe playing here one day. Like, if it was going, it's one of those things. It's like the Jeff Knox Jr. thing that came up. I think if it was going to happen, it would have by now, and I really don't think they need to, because Jon Ryan is going to demand a pretty hefty tag to come play in the CFL just because of his background, his experience, and the fact that he's a damn good punter. Unless he really feels like being charitable and he just really wants to finish his career and he's in Saskatchewan and he's willing to play for like the minimum, then okay. Yeah. But I don't think that's probably not the case. He's not in it for the money, but it's just more of like a respect kind of thing, right? And it comes down to the fact that, okay, Jon Ryan's a phenomenal punter. He was great in the NFL. I have no doubt that he'd be great in the CFL because he's great in the CFL before. But what Craig Dickinson does on special teams, especially with his punt team, is it's very systematic. It's very ball placement, and it's not that Jon Ryan can't do that. It's just they have a guy who's pretty good at doing that right now, and do you really need to pay someone else more to do the same job at essentially the same level?
No, I'm with you, especially too with Josh Bartel still counting as a national, thanks to the grandfathered in clause in the Josh Bartel rule. I don't think you need, if you wanted to flip that, like if you had an American punting there, maybe you'll look at moving him there. Yeah, exactly. You're right. I don't see the need for Jon Ryan. You know, much like the shiny red swing line stapler, Josh Bartel's a perfectly good stapler. He's not the shiny red swing line, but Jon Ryan is. And I think you like you said, if he wants to come play in Canada, there will be a team out there that will pay him to, come out and play in Canada. I mean, I think. To myself, I know like Winnipeg's got Medlock. Yep. But Ryan's a great punter. You can always bring him in there, and I mean, there's lots of teams that can use him, and even just for the little bit of a marketing boost. I wouldn't be surprised if he really wants to play a team like, Toronto.
Well, the Argos didn't work him out as well, I believe.
Exactly. To me, it makes more sense for the Argos to go out.
Well, and at the same time, I don't know if a punter is really going to move the needle in Toronto. The only reason a punter moves the needle is because he's from here and he played for the Rams, basically, right?
But I think, and I don't think he moves the needle in the sense that you want to come watch him. But if you sign a Jon Ryan and he's an extremely charismatic and funny guy, the biggest advantage for the Argos signing a Jon Ryan is not just his abilities on the football field, but you let him go out there, do some interviews, spend some time on TSN radio, Sportsnet radio. Get people interested because, the punter comes on and can be thoughtful and well-spoken and crack a couple jokes and maybe get you a little bit more interested in the team, right? Like, to me, that's the appeal of having Jon Ryan as a name guy on your team.
Yeah, that's entirely fair. I never really thought of exactly that side of it, but I mean, Josh Bartel's kind of that guy around here too. He's got a great personality and is able to cut some good jokes, and that's kind of why he's well-known around here, besides being a good punter, so... Yeah, I can definitely see that. Whether Josh Bartel and the rest of the specialists show up in about a week will be yet to be seen, as training camp is finally right around the corner. At least we're hoping it is. It's supposed to be. It's scheduled to open next weekend. Yep. And the biggest question right now is, will it? And there's been a lot of back and forth between the league recently. The CFLPA put out the letter to the members that various media got their hands on, including us. That is like, the teams in Quebec and Manitoba and Saskatchewan and BC are going to go, if there's no deal, they're not reporting. The teams in Ontario and Alberta will be in a legal strike position of the 23rd or whatever. Some people are crowing about competitive advantages, but really it's a few days for that team, whatever. I don't really think it's going to make that much of a difference. I mean, it looks weird, but the laws are what they are. Yeah. So, it's kind of hard to look ahead to camp right now without knowing really what's going to happen. And there's this older side of me that I still don't really know. And, I'm believing more and more that, if there's no deal, the players in those markets where they can won't show up. And they shouldn't. Yeah. It's really the only tool they have. And they shouldn't show up, and there shouldn't really. The pressure point is that first preseason game, because that first preseason game and all preseason games are essentially free money for the owners, because you're not really paying the players at that point, but it's still a gate for your team. Not a huge gate, but it's a gate where you're essentially don't have to pay anyone to be there. So you could argue a preseason game might be more important to the owners of this league than a regular season game, just on the fact of the costs involved are significantly lower.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I think I'm on board with, and so are you, with the players using their only tool of not showing up, because I think when they did show up, you and I were covering that training camp. Like, it took away all of their bargaining power.
If they show up, they might as well just sign whatever deal's on the table.
Exactly, and that's essentially what happened. You're right, that first preseason game, although, as you mentioned, not a huge revenue generator, it is a revenue generator where you don't have to pay player salaries, but I think any veteran member of camp, any veteran player you speak to says camp's about 2 weeks too long.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if the pressure really everybody doesn't start feeling the pressure till after that first week, because, you lose a week, maybe 2 of camp, everybody's kind of, let's face it, I'm sure everybody's okay with that. You can figure out most of your positional battles within 2 weeks.
Let's be honest, and especially I think in the CFL with smaller rosters, I think we in the media make a bigger deal out of certain position battles than there actually is. Like,
absolutely.
For the most part, the coaches come in with a mindset of who they believe their starters, who their guys are, and what the depth chart already looks like. It's just, is it going to be confirmed or not, essentially. Every once in a while, you get a situation that arises where there's a big change, and you're like, okay, then you have to realize, about it, like Corey Sheets in 2013, that was one of those situations where they admitted he was fourth on the depth chart, but he played his way onto the starting roster, and the rest is history, right?
Yeah,
so occasionally that happens, but for the most part, like even right now, I'm sure they have who they believe are going to be the starting Canadian receivers, even though, that's going to be the talk going into camp is who is going to be the starting receiver, who's going to back up Zach Collaros. They probably already know. It just depends on if something weird happens or not.
No, and you're absolutely right. And something weird, as you mentioned, is as you mentioned, Corey Sheets. I thought to myself, when was the last time a guy came out of left field to become a starter? And I legitimately just
and that was one of those, and that was like that. No, that was 2012. Sorry, not 13, where they didn't have a starting running back, so it wasn't that out of left field. They probably had an idea of what they thought, but the fact was there wasn't an incumbent there that he stole a job from.
No, absolutely, and he was so head and shoulders above. I remember went to that preseason game just as a fan, where Corey Sheets came out and just ran all over. But I remember texting a friend of mine and going, "He's the starting running back. Corey Sheets is the starting running back by a mile." Like this.
It was obvious.
Yeah, he was that damn good. So, I don't think the pressure will be on until about 2 weeks from now, and then I think both sides will batten down. I mean, I think everybody agrees the players deserve more. Mm-hmm. It's just how much more.
Yeah.
Right. And that's, you can't, I don't think this league's at a point yet you can tie the salary cap to revenues.
No, as much as I think that would be, a big league move for them. I think realistically there's probably really only 3 teams that consistently make money in this league.
Yeah, exactly.
And from what I kind of, you snoop around a little bit, it feels like that's Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, and Hamilton.
Edmonton as well too.
Edmonton did this year, but research. They made $2.8 million, but it looks like a lot of that this year was based on the Grey Cup. Yeah, but they are a team that are, they teeter kind of along the line, so they're not bad. And I talked about this with a friend of the show, Dan Plaster. Okay, so Toronto. At least now the Argos' losses are able to be absorbed quite easily by MLSE. Like the Argos' losses are like a blip on the radar compared to their overall revenue picture. Yeah. I believe in Ottawa, the Red Blacks probably lose money, but there's a bigger picture of play out there where their sports entities, like them and the 67s and the Fury, are more of a tool to get people down there to generate revenue through the real estate more than anything else. Absolutely. So, if they lose money there, it's offset elsewhere, and it's all big picture to them.
Yeah.
Montreal, absolutely, they need to get that on track. Same with BC. Though, interestingly enough, the Whitecaps drew about a BC Lions crowd the other day. Just saying.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
and
largely
and Calgary,
some shady-ish going on at the Whitecaps.
But. Yeah, there is. Calgary, again, they're part of another group that they can absorb the losses. I think they need a bit of a shot in the arm there, but they can be sustainable financially. But yeah, there isn't this overabundance of money in the league, even though we've seen revenues go up. Because revenues have gone up, but as revenues have gone up, and as football has grown, and as this league has done more to keep up with what professional football has become, costs have gone up a heck of a whole lot too. Like, let's not fool ourselves into how expensive it is to run a professional football team too. So I'm not trying to say that I'm on the owner's side in this. I just get that you can't really go probably to the extreme that we all believe the players deserve, just because the CFL isn't quite there yet. I don't know how they get there. I don't think it's CFL 2.0 quite yet, but they probably can. This league just needs a shot in the arm of something to really rejuvenate itself.
No, and I'm absolutely with you. Honestly, to me, the more I look at it, the more I see, to me, I don't know, and anybody that listens that wants to reach out on Twitter or whatever, I think if you set the minimum salary around that 75 to 80 grand a year mark, that a guy can comfortably live off of that.
And the league has a very poor Canadian dollar right now working against it, which is unfortunate. There's not really a lot you can do about that, really. This isn't the NHL where they had the old equalization program where they gave some money to Canadian teams to offset that. Cool, that worked for the NHL because they are in both countries. There's nothing that can, it's not like the NFL can say, oh, here's a check for $3 million to make up for your weak dollar. Like,
and that's exactly it. But I mean, to me, I think if you float that minimum salary number around 75 to 80.
Yeah, you could probably slowly build it up over the course of the CBA, so it's not like a substantive day one cost increase for most of these teams.
Well, and I would agree. I would be, to me, I think the top end guys are always going to get paid, and that's fine.
Yep.
But I think your bottom end guys, like your practice roster guys that are making pennies to be on the practice roster, and starting salary in the league being $50G. Again, I know that's a lot for some people. That is a lot of money at $50Gs, but they're also putting their bodies on the line and doing something that none of us could do. I would love to see some sort of sliding scale that by your fifth year in the league, you can't make less than 125 or something like that, right? You've paid your dues, you put in your time, some sort of
not a lot of guys really get to that point, quite frankly.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, you're right. There's not a lot of minimum salaried guys that stick around that long. So I'd like to see something, and I know it's still rare, but I would like to see the CFL be able to pay people well enough that becoming a police officer or a firefighter is not a raise. If you still want to do that for the many reasons that playing professional football, the things it can do to your body and will do to your body. But to me, a guy should be able to make a decent little living for his 3-year average career in the CFL. Again, nobody's going to get rich, but at least the guy should be able to support his family and not have to bend over backwards and eat Mr. Noodles every single night was on the practice roster, right?
Yeah, I think that's fair, and that's probably where it should go, and we'll have to wait and see kind of how negotiations play out. And there's obviously a lot of other things at stake, things that are far more pressing, and there's a lot of talk about health benefits and this and that and the other thing, and all that stuff is great, and I think all those things are important. They need to be discussed about. But at the end of the day, all this stuff always comes down to money. That other stuff is negotiable if the money is there, is essentially what it eventually usually comes down to.
Yeah, you're absolutely bang on with that. So I think we missed the first 2 weeks of camp, maybe the first preseason game, but it'll get resolved. There's no way it can't.
No, this league can't afford to miss actual games.
No, absolutely. You are absolutely correct with that, Joel.
And so I guess the biggest question, and I think I'm going to write this piece for 3 Down Nation a little bit here as we're going to get into training camp preview mode on the site. So look for your previews across the league coming out this week. And for me, Rider training camp, we know what's happening on defense. We know what's happening on special teams. So it's not overly interesting. We know Zach Collaros is going to be the starting quarterback.
Yeah.
So the only question is, what can the offense do this year? Can they find a Canadian receiver who can contribute a little bit? You know, no offense to Corey Watson, but he's going to be in there to be a blocker if these other two guys don't step up. So I think really if you're going into camp, that is really the only question is what is going to happen with the offense? Can they find some sort of form where they can help the defense this year? Because as we talk about the defense maybe being stronger in a traditional sense, that means they're not going to score a touchdown every single game like they did last year.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right, Joel. I mean, I think an interesting battle for me, and maybe you see a signing after the CBA is settled, but history says, despite what everybody says, that Zach Collaros is not more susceptible to concussions after his other concussions, that's BS. That is pure and utter BS. Like, ask any doctor, you've had one concussion, you are at risk for many. I am living proof of that, right? Who's going to be the backup quarterback? Because
I don't have any confidence in Cody Fajardo coming off the bench, I'll tell you that much.
God, like zero confidence in that. He is the master of the quarterback sneak, but yeah, that is a position. The quarterback is always scrutinized in this league. But I think that will be the one place where you have to watch who's going to be the backup. Does somebody emerge? And just can Zach Collaros get it done? I believe if healthy, Zach Collaros can be the guy that won't lose you a game.
Yeah, well, he proved that last year.
Exactly.
Like, I will maintain, I think if Zach Collaros was healthy enough to play in that playoff game, they would have beat the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. The way that game played, because Collaros would have made that pass to Naaman Roosevelt in the opening quarter for a touchdown that would have changed the entire flow of that game.
Yep, and I'm absolutely with you on that one. But I mean, you know, we talked to a guy, you know, when we talked to Derek Taylor, the new voice of the Riders, who does research upon research upon research, and he's
the anti-us, essentially.
Exactly, basically. Yeah, exactly. When we do research, it's like, holy crap, one of us did something. When Derek Taylor does research, that's just called Tuesday night. But when DT is still high on Collaros, and I think for Collaros, that's it's not the same vote as confidence of hearing it from your head coach, but you know, when a guy like DT who knows his ish and is the new voice of your team is high on you, that's a cool little feather in your cap. So I'm hoping that Derek is right. I'm hoping he'd come out, but again, history says you're going to probably need your backup quarterback for 3 to 4 games if Zach Collaros is your guy.
No matter who your guy is, that's just basically the world of football today. I don't think anyone has any expectations really of any player going through an entire season other than maybe, you know, 3 or 4 of your offensive linemen, frankly. Like for the most part, you're going to have the guys miss a game or two. And at the quarterback position, that is entirely vital. It is the most important position on the field for a reason. So you need that guy behind them. That, okay, if you need him for an entire season, you're not going to go anywhere, but you know he can come in and at least not lose a football game or two.
Yeah,
and maybe David Watford evolves to that guy. I don't know. Maybe he takes a big step this year. Maybe this other kid they signed out of Colorado is that guy. I don't know. He's not going to be there this year, but maybe he gets there. So it's always, you know, I always maintain the quarterbacks in this league generally come out of nowhere. It's not usually the guy you expect to be. So that'll be interesting. And, you know, I don't think there's an answer on the roster right now, so you're kind of crossing your fingers unless you really do think Cody Fajardo can work in your offense, which I guess maybe he can. It's not an overly complicated offense. It's not an exciting offense. You know, he can probably throw the bubble screen. I don't know. Like, like I would hope so.
throw the bubble screen and the 7-yard slant. But does this mean, Joel, now that we've made peace with Sam Hurrell being primarily a specials teamer, does that mean Cody Fajardo is our new designated whipping boy?
I have a hard time making the backup quarterback the whipping boy.
You mean the starting quarterback after Zach Collaros coughs too hard and gives himself a 17th concussion?
We'll have to see. I'm willing to give it a look here, and I have a hard time, making a guy who is really has no chance of succeeding being the whipping boy. I think it's one of those things that has to evolve naturally.
Or we could just make him the unnatural whipping boy. So if the Riders lose, like, we blame Cody Fajardo somehow.
Oh, it's like the old #blame Durant.
Exactly. I am so on board with it.